Good afternoon. Well, there's a lot going on today, basically. Sorry for the holdup. There was a severe car accident right outside on Pleasant coming down 83 that my chief of staff was involved with. And so she's fine, but her car is probably totaled. A construction truck went through a red light. So let's keep her in prayer. I'm sure that's where she's heading, yeah. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and start this hearing. In 30 seconds. Okay, so she is being transported to Mercy. So again, let's keep her in prayer. Okay, let's start the hearing. Welcome, everyone. I am Sharon Green Middleton, Vice President of the City Council, Representative for the 6th Council District, and Chairperson for the Economic and Community Development Committee. This afternoon, we will hear the following bills. Bill number 22-0225, Vacant Structures, Nuisance Abatement Penalty. Also, Bill number 22-0206, Vacant Structures, and this is the registration fees and penalties. And then Bill number 22-0205, Vacant Structures, Emergency Response Fee. I will read these bills in together so that they can be discussed together, but they will be voted on separately. Agency should please address all bills that they have been referred to when making their reports. And in attendance today, we have Ryan Dorsey of the 3rd District. And we have Odette Ramos of the 14th District.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And we have Robert Stokes of the 12th District. John Bullock of the 9th District does have a commission hearing at the same time, so he is going to be coming in a little late. Mark Conway of the 4th District and Antonio Glover of the 13th District both have excused absences. And we also have a representative from the Office of the President, and that's Tiffany Macklin, Deputy Director for the Legislative Office. And representative from the Mayor's Office, we have Tyler Schneller, which is from Government Relations. So let's begin. Bill number 22-0225, Vacant Structures, Nuisance Abatement Penalty for the purpose of increasing a certain penalty for failing to obey a nuisance abatement order at a certain type of property, providing for a special effective date, and generally relating to nuisance abatement penalties for vacant structures. And Bill number 22-0206, Vacant Structures, Registration Fees and Penalties for the purpose of revising the registration process for vacant structures, modifying the registration fee for vacant structures, modifying the registration renewal process for vacant structures, modifying the penalties applied to vacant structures in violation of city code, providing for a special effective date, and generally relating to registration fees and penalties for vacant structures. And Bill number 22-0205, Vacant Structures, Emergency Response Fee for the purpose of establishing a fee structure for city emergency response services, provided or rendering at vacant structures, defining certain terms, providing for a special effective date, and generally relating to emergency response fees for vacant structures. The committee will go ahead and start with our agency representative reports.
Can I open us up, Madam Chair?
And yes, Mr. Shanella, you can open it up.
Sorry, let me just. Madam Chair, members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony on the proposed legislation regarding vacant properties in our city. On behalf of the administration, I want to express my gratitude to the Council President for his dedication to addressing the intergenerational issue of vacants in our city. To begin, I would like to address City Council Bill 22-0205 concerning the emergency response fee. While I understand the intent behind holding property owners accountable for fire services rendered, vacant property owners accountable for fire services render, we have reservations, which you will hear more about from the fire department regarding the feasibility of accurately determining the cost of fire response for each vacant property. This process would require extensive resources and personnel from the fire department, which may not be practical given current constraints. Additionally, the bill does not adequately address scenarios where a fire originates elsewhere and spreads to a vacant property, unfairly burdening its owner with the response cost. So quite simply, if a fire starts at an owner-occupied property but spreads to an adjacent property, which could be vacant, the vacant property owner could be on the hook, according to this bill, for still having to reimburse the city for fire services rendered, though the fire did not originate on their property. Moving on to City Council Bill 22-0225, which seeks to increase penalties for owners of vacant properties. Again, I commend the effort to address the issue of nuisance properties. However, it is essential to consider the existing framework of nuisance abatement and ensure that the proposed penalties do not disproportionately affect responsible property owners who are actively seeking to address the vacant building notice or any outstanding notices of violation on their property. Regarding City Council Bill, and you'll hear more from DHCD on that one as well. Regarding City Council Bill 22-0206, the proposal to increase registration fees and penalties for vacant properties presents logistical challenges. Requiring registration every 6 months would place additional strain on resources and may discourage cooperation from property owners. Furthermore, many vacant properties lack a responsible party to register them, which could lead to increased delays in abating nuisance properties. And you'll hear more from DHCD on that as well. In light of those concerns, I want to be clear that the intent of the council president is received, duly noted, and shared by the administration. Alternatively, the administration has included in the mayor's priority legislation for 2024, House Bill 2. This legislation, which is included in the, this legislation would authorize the mayor and the city council to set a special property tax rate for vacant and abandoned properties. This approach aligns with the council's intent to make it financially infeasible to hold on to vacant properties in Baltimore by adjusting the tax structure to reflect the true costs and societal impact of vacant properties. We can provide a more effective deterrent while generating revenue to support revitalization efforts. Furthermore, the decision was made to amend HB2 into a statewide bill. This demonstrates a recognition of the broader implications of vacant property issues beyond the city of Baltimore. This is the issue being faced by many jurisdictions across the state of Maryland. In conclusion, while the administration appreciates the intent behind these bills, I urge the council to consider the practical implications and explore other tools coming down the pipeline, such as what is laid out in House Bill 2, by leveraging taxation as a tool to incentivize responsible property ownership. We can move closer to our shared goal of revitalizing our communities and reducing the blight of vacant properties in Baltimore. Thank you, and again, we look forward to continued partnership with the council as we do this very important work. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee before we move to the other agencies? Yes, Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just looking at HB2, and I saw that it was amended, but I can't see the amendments. Is that what you're saying, that it was amended to go statewide and not just Baltimore City?
Right, yeah, they
good.
made the determination to make it a statewide bill so that across the state of Maryland, all jurisdictions can set a special tax rate for vacant properties.
Right. I think that's excellent. Okay. That actually hopefully increases the chances of passage also. So. Great, thank you.
Councilman Stokes.
Yes, real quick. Thank you, Madam Chair. Bill 220205, I'm a little uncomfortable with this word fee. We always taxing people in the city, property tax, fees for this. Could you explain to me, where's this fee going? What is it for? And how is that going to enact us trying to do some real development in this city? We're always putting fees on the constituents here. I'm looking at all three. You got a penalty here, penalty there, and a fee there. Where's this fee going? Who's going to pay for it? Because we can't keep doing this to people in Baltimore City.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Councilman. And I want to be clear that these are not administration bills. These are the council president's bills. The emergency response fee, based on the legislation in its current state, would be on the owner of a vacant property to essentially reimburse the city for fire services rendered at the vacant property. So, for example, let's say you own your home and I own the property next to your home, but my property is vacant. If your property catches on fire, which will be considered an owner-occupied property, you can call 911, the fire department will come out, they'll put the fire out, you won't get a bill. If my property next door to yours, which is vacant, has a vacant building notice, all these different things, catches on fire, the city will come out and respond, but based on this bill, the onus will be on the fire department to then calculate essentially a bill. How much did it cost the city to respond to the fire at the vacant property and what is the actual word they use? Extinguish it. So if the cost was, let's say, $20,000, and you owe the city $20,000. But of course, there are other legal concerns with that, because when you think about a fee, we're only supposed to recoup what the cost actually incurred by the city to do the service. And because each fire is different, they require different levels of response from our fire department. So it would be hard to set a fee because it would always be different. No one fire is the same as the next. So whereas one fire could be extinct, and I'm just using examples, I'm not a fire professional. Ms. Washington is right behind me. One fire could be extinguished with just one truck. Some fires need multiple trucks and rescue teams and other specialized operations, hazmat. Let's say you need a fire marshal that has to come out. All of those things cost money. But it would be burdensome on the fire department to have to go through, because essentially, as a part of the cost, they would need to determine how much did it cost the city to have, let's say, a lieutenant, a battalion chief, a paramedic, a firefighter 1, a firefighter 2, gas for the truck running. Like, it's so wide-ranging that it would be very difficult to lay out a way for the fire department to issue a bill.
So I have a follow-up. Let's say the fee is $20,000. Where's that fee going? Is it going back to helping our seniors who can't put a roof on their house, need some electrical, not just going back into general fund? How do that fee now take advantage and make sure we take care of a lot of our seniors? When it's raining, water coming in their house. When they need some electrical, is the money going back to the city, or are we going to put it in a pot to help our seniors here, or people who need some assistance to their homes because they can't afford some of the work that need to be done?
I would sure, yeah, there's finance.
Thank you. So the fees as a structure, it will go to the general fund. It's not restricted for specific purposes.
So, okay. I don't know why it's going to general fund. That money need to go to our seniors, to people need help with their housing right now. It's on a fixed income. We know seniors and all my council colleagues, we got seniors in here, haven't got their roof done in 10 years, and we putting all the money in the general fund. There should be a pot of money like they do in Annapolis for the gambling, and you can't touch it. If we talking about charging a fee, the fee should go towards people in this city that need some help, not the general fund. And if they want to do it differently, fine. I can't accept, I'm not going to support fees that keep going back to general fund, and then the general fund do what they want with it. Where's the pot of money to help people in this city? That's my comment. Thank you.
Duly noted, duly noted. And I just think that specifically for this, though, in this case, I think the money will go back through the general fund to the fire department because they incurred the cost. So the cost is actually on the fire department to put it out. And then essentially that owner is reimbursing the city for that service rendered by our fire department.
See how long that'll take before they get their money back.
Point well taken. Any other comments?
Madam Chair.
Councilwoman Ramos.
To my colleague's question, the likelihood of somebody who owns a vacant property actually paying the fee is low. And so that's one of the reasons why the in-rem tool that we've talked about so much is important, because we can, with these types of bills and also with the vacancy tax we just talked about, the idea is to get the liens up high enough that we can take it through in-rem and be able to then make sure that the property is put back to productive use. So the likelihood of these even being paid is pretty low. And we've passed bills before in the last 2 years to continue to increase these fees. And the council president, I think, is proposing a couple of other ways to do that. Ultimately, the vacancy tax would be better, frankly, because it doesn't put any burden on our agencies to try to calculate the funds and the fees and all of that. It basically just says you're going to pay this amount, you know, in taxes, which you won't pay, so that we can then take, you know, foreclose on the property because the liens get higher than the value of the property. So my understanding in talking with the council president about this a couple of times is that that's really the intent of what he's trying to do here. But I understand your point, and if, let's say, the intent was to try to get these paid, the city council does not have any authority other than with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but the council, we don't have authority to direct money into various funds other than the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, because as you all know, we all worked on that together, and that was one of the reasons for the charter amendment, was to allow for the council to be able to create funding sources to put into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which could be used for what you're talking about. That's the only case that we have the opportunity to do that. But otherwise, this would go just directly to the general fund. But again, I think the intent is to just put the liens as high as they can in order to take this through in rem.
And I completely agree, because there's a penalty in each of these bills for noncompliance, right? And essentially, that's what it would do. We don't think that they would pay it, but it would then be a lien against the property, which would make it wouldn't take as long to get to that point where the property is eligible for MREM, either the current version or 2.0 that we have coming online soon.
Councilman Stokes, you have another comment?
Just real quick, I don't have a problem with the fee. I have a problem with the fee going. Why we can't create a lockbox like we did in Annapolis on our casinos? The money is used for a certain time. You can't touch it. You can't put it in the general fund. Why can't we create a lockbox if we're going to charge these kind of fees to really help the residents in this city that need some help? What's wrong with a lockbox? They did in Annapolis. We can create one here in Baltimore City. Thank you.
Thank you.
Charter amendment. It would need a charter amendment. It would have to be done by charter. They can't create it. Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the city solicitor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff Hochstetler with the Solicitor's Office. Starting with 220225, which is the increased penalty for failing to abate a nuisance, but only for vacant properties. As noted in the bill report, creating such a distinction like that between vacant and non-vacant properties is permissible if there's a rational basis for doing so. So for example, to the extent somehow failing to abate a nuisance on a vacant property is more harmful to the neighborhood than failing to abate from an occupied property, but potentially that could be a rational basis. But as long as that basis exists, then law can approve 220225 for form and legal sufficiency. Moving on to 220206, which sets some registration fees and penalties for vacant property renewals, things like that. My colleague, who dug into this and wrote the bill report, is unfortunately not able to cover the hearing, but I'll note that in her bill report, she mentioned a number of internal inconsistencies and potentially under-inclusive language that might not actually be targeting some of the properties that were meant to be targeted, and certainly offered to talk with the sponsors to help work through some of those issues for 220206.
Okay.
And then for 220205, law can approve this for form and legal sufficiency, so long as the fees that are mentioned there are somehow tied to the actual costs in responding to those emergencies.
Thank you. Department of Housing and Community Development.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Stephanie Murdoch, Director of Legislative Services for Baltimore City DHCD. I'm joined here today by Deputy Commissioner Hessler, to my left. In our bill report, we do refer to the police department. However, we do have some concerns about this legislation. We do support the intent of the bill. However, we have some concerns around the actual implementation of it. And we have highlighted in our bill report 2 possible amendments, which are technical amendments, and I can briefly address those with you. What we have proposed is on page 2 to strike lines 6 through 8, which exclude accessory structures from the provision. We do not need to include this exclusion, as some nuisance activities can occur in garages or sheds. The second amendment is clarifying on page 2 of the bill, lines 19 and 20. We would propose amending to read a fine of not more than $1,000 or imprisonment for more than 90 days, or both fine and imprisonment if the building is a vacant structure. And then on that same page, we would be deleting lines 21 through 24, which reads, the offender is the owner of the vacant structure. The language is not necessary if the intent of the bill is to target the owner of the vacant structure rather than the offender. Overall, we are opposed to the changes outlined in the legislation. However, we have included the amendments in our bill report, and we are committed to working with the council president and the city council and the mayor's office to collaboratively address blight in Baltimore City. I can move on to the next bill, if that's okay with you. Okay, great. Okay, next up is 220206, vacant structures, registration and penalty fees. This bill would require owners of vacant structures to renew registration every 6 months and would create additional work for DHCD and further complicate our property registration and licensing program. We would object to the shortening of the registration renewal requirements, and we would recommend it remain at the annual requirement. Should the bill go into effect as drafted, we would require additional administrative staff to coordinate the work. The computations proposed in the legislation would be more labor-intensive than our existing software could handle by creating a complex penalty schedule that may not be able to be programmed in. So we would need IT upgrades and more staff and additional training if this bill were to move forward. However, we do support the concept and intent of the sponsor around holistically addressing vacant buildings in Baltimore City. And we do not have any amendments on this bill, but we do have some practical concerns around the complexity of implementing this bill. So we have offered an unfavorable report. And then finally, moving on to our last bill, 220205, vacant structures, emergency response fees. We did defer to the fire department as the directly impacted agency. We do understand the blighting influence that city-owned city-owned and privately owned vacant properties have on our communities and the hardships they can impose. However, we also have practical concerns around the complexity of this bill as well, and it would be unclear if those fees and fines could be recouped. We do have an amendment for this bill. This is another technical amendment. On page 5, lines 13 to 15, we define a vacant structure as any structure that is subject to an unabated violation notice. So the word unabated can be removed from the definition. That's unnecessary. A structure either has a vacant building notice or it doesn't. So it's just a technical amendment there. We do stand by our bill report and defer to the fire department, and both myself and Jason stand by to answer any questions you may have today.
Okay, for clarity, you have an amendment for bills 225 and 205, and then you have an unfavorable report for 206.
That's correct.
Okay. Any questions to housing from the committee at this point? Moving on to the Department of Finance. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilwoman Ramos, question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I was not
that's
as
okay.
quick on the take. For 220206, would you be opposed to leaving the renewal period for a year but increasing the fee for, or the registration amount for vacant properties?
I think that would be an amendment that would work. The amount of the fee, as long as it complies with, the code and the requirements and meets law standards, isn't as big a concern as just all the technical pieces that create staggered fees and multiple registration dates, which then just has an enormous impact on staffing.
But I think if we amended it, basically taking out the second part of the bill and keeping the first part of the bill to increase the fine, and we can discuss what that amount would be, that would still be okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll be discussing an amendment for 206. Thank you. Department of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pedro Aponte, Assistant Budget Director for the Department of Finance, reporting on City Council Bill 220205. We analyzed the bill. We consider that we are not able to provide a fiscal impact for that legislation in particular. We defer to Housing and Law Department for the input. There are some operational complications to assess a value for a fee, and then for that reason we couldn't put a fiscal impact for that particular one. In reference to City Council Bill 0206, for similar reasons, in terms of the operational component of how to assess the fee and the structure that is proposed, we consider that the way it's structured, it wouldn't have a negative fiscal impact for the city, given the fact that we have to staff multiple units in order to move forward the provisions of the legislation. It doesn't feel like the way it's structured will sufficiently provide resources to offset the cost that will be necessary to carry forward this legislation. Therefore, we oppose to this bill as well.
Okay. So just for clarity, 225 and 205, you deferred to Housing, and if those amendments are approved or discussed, that will be sufficient? That was
205 we defer, 206 we oppose.
206, okay. But 225, you defer as well?
It wasn't deferred to us.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Just for clarity, thank you. Baltimore Police Department.
Good afternoon, Erin Murphy, Director of Government Affairs for Baltimore City Police Department. We were only assigned 22-0225, and we're in support, and we stand by our bill report. Thank you.
Thank you. and Fire Department.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and council members. Kim Washington, Baltimore City Fire Department. We defer to the Department of Housing and Community Development on 220206 and 220225. With regards to 220205, we have given an unfavorable report. Mr. Chanel has outlined some of the reasons. There are administrative burdens. We have approximately 600 plus fires a day, and our system does not determine in the moment whether the structure, the call is at a vacant property or an occupied property. So the administrative burden of going through 600 plus fires a day and to determine whether or not they occurred at a vacant structure would create a burden on us administratively. I think the facets report that you all solicited a few years back talked about our administrative capacity being about maybe 30% of what it should be. So this would add another layer on top of that. Additionally, fees normally have to be connected to the service. It is also hard to determine, a sort of standardized fee. Some fires require, as Mr. Chanel said, an engine, some truck engine, but, so on any given fire, you could have a range of fees. You also have a range of personnel that come to those fees, so there's no standardized hourly rate. Additionally, should we get additional resources, we would want ideally to direct those additional resources to more mission-oriented administrative tasks so that we can have our people trained more adequately, trained on the latest methods. So all of those combined lead us to an unfavorable report for 220205.
Thank you. Sounds like more discussion needs to occur with 205. Moving on to information and technology.
Good afternoon, Fabian Dorcius, Legislative Liaison for Baltimore City Information and Technology. We were referred 220205, vacant structures emergency response fees. This bill would require systems modifications from BSIT. We submitted a report that outlines both the development period and the cost for those modifications. We have no position on the bill and are happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions from the committee or comments? Okay, we're checking for public testimony. And there's none online, and we're checking to see if anyone signed in. And no one has signed in. So what we're going to do, we're definitely committed to working with the mayor's office as we go through all three of these bills. Thank you for submitting your amendments that we will look at, and I'm sure that we will probably work on and have another discussion on this, and possibly more amendments will be coming in. And on that note, if no one from the committee has any further comments, we will go into recess until further notice. Thank you.